we had the option to not necessarily follow that same script, and we had the option to try things out. And many who left Yahoo did, of course, move into the startup world, and I did too for a while. I did try that out. I tried a little bit of time in a NGO as well. Then of course, I kind of serendipitously landed up working with dogs, I think, because not only was I passionate about dogs, but I also had a personal story where my dog met with a horrific accident. A car ran over her face. And I knew, I mean, she miraculously survived, but I knew that she was going to have a lot of emotional issues. And so I started looking into that, and it just opened a huge... you probably will understand this a little bit better at the end of the talk. It opened up a huge world for me in terms of understanding myself. And I think that kind of really what drew me in. It may sound like it was working with dogs, but it was therapeutic and healing for me. And there was a lot of self-understanding that I gained through the process. And because the brain chemistry is so similar, actually, is surprisingly similar to a great extent. And that is what I will kind of talk about today. So that's where I ended up with dogs. And then one thing led to another. And I got into research with free living dogs, street dogs. And now I'm doing a master's in anthrozoology, which is human animal interaction. So I'm really going into that world. I'm diving deep in.
And you also ended up writing a book as well, right?
That's right. That's right. I wrote a book. It's called Dog Knows, Learning How to Learn from Dogs, published by HarperCollins. So it's available on Amazon and and all the other places too. So yes.
Awesome.
I did.
So I mean, probably at some point of time, if you share it in your chat, in the chat message as well, we'll also the link to the book.
Yeah.
Right. Then I'll also go ahead and we'll post it on the Farmizon app, etc.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Sometimes I get distracted with. Let me just get it.
We can
right
do it
away.
later. We can do it later. Not a problem. We can do it.
It's better to do it right away. Otherwise, okay. I'm notorious for forgetting things. So I'm going to do that right now. I got it. There you go. All right.
Thanks. And guys, participants who have joined in, please feel free to turn on your video and show us your canine friends as well. That will be who you are and who your canine friends are. That would be pretty awesome. I'll get mine. I have 3 of them, so I'll get mine as well at some point of time.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say I'll get mine. She's sitting right here and giving me like very judgmental looks. She's not a big fan of these classes, so I have just resigned to the fact that my dog doesn't appreciate my work, and that's okay.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Let's get started.
All right. Let's get started. So I'm going to share screen on and off because I want to, what do you say? Also kind of talk to you guys directly. Don't want too much screen time. So we're going to be talking about how to decode dog behavior. And it's just an introduction, really. So I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear on what it is not before I get started. So please, it's definitely not a professional training course. I think that most of you can understand that. So it does not qualify you in any way to give advice to anybody. And I don't think I need to stress that more. And it's also not replacement for professional advice. So it may not solve all of your problems. I'm going to try and give you as many relatable case studies as possible. What it can be, I mean, some of you may find all the answers. It might just be a light bulb moment for you, and you might find all the answers that you're looking for. But more realistically, I think it's going to give you information on which direction to head if you do have problem behaviors in your dogs and things like that. If you're going to be getting a professional, what to look for, what to stay away from, and to understand and collaborate with them better. And then for a few of you, it may open door to a new kind of a passion like bird watching. Dogs are also very fascinating. Their behavior is very fascinating. So maybe it will. I'm hoping that maybe I can inspire one or two of you to be absolutely inspired to understand dog behavior more. So that's kind of what I'm hoping we will achieve today. And I will start with sort of, as they say, let's take it from the top. When we say understanding dog behavior, what is behavior? And I'm going to guess, based on the conversation we had in the beginning, that all of you are quite savvy. So I'm going to take that, what do you say, take that liberty. So let's talk about what is the behavior of an organism. When we say that there is a behavior in any kind of living being, right? What are we talking about? So first thing is, it's something that we see external. It's usually involves movement or a sequence of movement. So it is not mood. Behavior is something that you see visibly, to your eyes. And it serves the organism some function. So what do I mean by that? Now, all of you guys are sitting. Most of you don't have your camera on, but I'm guessing many of you are sitting somewhat still. And then you will engage in a behavior. So maybe that behavior is blinking, or you get up and go get water. So that's behavior. There is some movement involved. I can see it, and it serves a purpose. You all know why you blink. You all know why you drink water. There is a purpose to it. So a simple way of putting it is, you drink water because you're thirsty. That's a layman's explanation for it, right? But if we were to dig a little deeper, and bear with me for a few moments, I'm going to geek out on you and then I will come back. So if we were to talk about it a bit more scientifically, it is behavior helps our body to return back to homeostasis. And what that means is, your body tries to maintain all these different chemical parameters, right? Amount of water, the salt concentration, the different hormones, the temperature, blah, blah, blah. All that has to be somewhere in the right range. And your brain has something like for instance, like a fridge has a thermostat, or your AC has a thermostat. So your brain has something like that. So just like the thermostat, if the temperature starts dropping, rather the temperature starts increasing in an AC, the thermostat gives feedback, and the AC will say, okay, we have to increase the cooling. Whereas if the temperature drops enough, we say, okay, stop the cooling. So something like that is happening in the body. So if the water level, for example, is dropping in your body, the hydration level is dropping in your body, there is a thermostat kind of a thing that will inform the rest of your body and brain that you need to do something about it, because you're dropping water levels. And the result of that is that feeling of thirst. So there is biologically, the behavior is driven biologically because the body needs something, and it's saying, okay, I will induce this feeling of thirst because I need this individual to go take action. So if we were to try and put this in a nice tight format, behavior is basically a collection of observable actions. So you need to be able to see it, and it's meant to restore homeostasis, meant to serve a function. Okay. So I'm just going to leave that up there for a second for it to sink in. We don't have to necessarily remember all details of this. Okay. Now, let me just move on. Right. So when we talk about behavior that is driven by certain needs in the body, certain biological needs in the body, that's kind of how we talk about it. So what are the biological needs in the body? It can be physical needs, the way I mentioned. So it can be like thirst, the way I mentioned, thirst, hunger, and things like that. Or it can be emotional needs as well. And this one's important because this is kind of, that connection is a little harder to see for most people. So when I say emotional needs, it's not some kind of a woohoo, right? It's like a lot of people kind of dismiss it off as this new age thingy, but not really. There is a huge amount of, the whole field of neuroscience and endocrinology is about looking at the physical impact of emotional needs. So there is a very sort of measurable impact to the emotions that we experience. So for instance, putting it very, very simply, and if Some of you, if you're doctors and things like that, you probably know much better, but really simplifying it, for instance, emotions can significantly change your heart rate, blood flow to the muscles, blood flow to the stomach. So it's blood flow to the muscles can go up and the stomach goes down when you're excited. And that's kind of why when you're excited or anxious, you kind of feel it in your stomach, you feel it in your gut. That's actually a physical change. And a lot of chemicals can kind of go haywire. Some can shoot through the roof and some can drop very drastically. And so what is needed by the body is two things. One is whatever behavior you need to engage in so that the body can return back to homeostasis. So for instance, go drink water. That's the behavior that will return you back to homeostasis. So any behavior that will return you back to homeostasis. And the second is behaviors to cope with these drastic changes that are happening in the body. So you might see, for instance, when people are anxious, they might start chewing their nails or pacing. And these are all coping behaviors because of these changes that are kind of brought about chemically and through electrical signals in the body. So a great example of a good emotion to talk about, which is very dramatic, is fear. So when you experience fear, you can imagine heart rate raising, you can feel the blood flowing to your extremities, right? You can feel your ears get hot and things like that. And what is the need? The need is to create a feeling of safety. That is what will return you to baseline. And so what is the behavior? You're either likely to run away, flight to fight. You might have heard of that, right? You're either likely to run away or not fight. Flight to fight is such a vague term. It's not really right. You're likely to either run away or posture with this, see what I can do, see I am big, kind of a posturing, or what we call fawning. So it's, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me, that kind of a reaction. So those are behaviors that can return you to safety, and you're likely to see those behaviors. And after the threat has passed, there is still a lot of chemical imbalance, and you can see a lot of coping behaviors. A classical example of that, many of you will relate with, is stress eating. We eat and eat and eat after a stressful situation, particularly after that intense stress has passed, we need to eat. Or pacing, or like I said, chewing the nails and things like that. And if these are not possible, if these behaviors are not possible, if an individual can't engage in this, you're likely to see freezing. They completely freeze up because they don't know what to do. Sadly, a lot of people tend to think of that as, oh, the dog calmed down. That's really not the case. So going back to sort of our, just highlights, quick thing for you to remember at this point is physical or emotional needs drive behavior. Keep that in your mind as we go through behavior, as we start examining behavior. This is what I do as a professional. Anytime I see a behavior, I try to ask, what are the physical and emotional needs that have driven this behavior? And somewhere there, I get my answer and I start working with it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right. So I did do a lot of homework to get lots of notes in. So I'm referring to my notes. Now, the job of any behavior, animal behavior expert, is to kind of step in and map the behavior to the needs. So they see a behavior and they tell you, oh yeah, this behavior is driven by these needs. And that's kind of how we work. And this is not rocket science. In fact, all of us do it. You do it, I do it, we do it all the time. But the difference is, often if we are not experts in that particular animal, we get that mapping wrong. And that's kind of where we tend to, interpret it wrongly and deal with it wrongly. And a great example is, I recently was in a talk with a snake expert, because I'm on the farm here and we have lots of snakes here. So we have to understand a bit about snake behavior. And a classical myth that you hear about snakes is the hood up, right? The cobra with the hood up and dancing. And it's a myth that cobra is dancing, that the cobra is dancing to the tunes of the snake charmer. That's a myth. What we now know through learning about snake behavior is that this lifting of the hood up is really a snake that is very, very stressed out. They're unable to deal with it. And this is kind of a way of them kind of threatening, or what I mentioned, posturing. Now, if we understand it incorrectly, we're probably going to say, hey, the snake's having a great time. He's partying and he's dancing. But if you understand it correctly, it's just a whole other perspective opens up. And that's, I think, what we need to look at even with dogs. Sadly, with dogs, the world of dogs is full of myths. It's just particularly because there are so many people who claim themselves to be dog experts. Unlike snake experts, there aren't that many people who claim to be a snake expert, but there are so many people who claim to be a dog expert, and it's an unregulated industry. So what's happening is you have people who have had education, outdated education, no education, all kinds of things, making these claims, and they're filling the dog world with myths. And my hope is that today, hopefully, I can break one or two of those. So let's start with something that I just mentioned, the snake's hood up. Now, this is what in our class we call a distance creating signal. It's a signal that the animal is giving, and the signal is meant to create distance. It is meant to ask for space. All animals do it. It is meant when they feel threatened, they feel like they cannot back away, run away. Remember what I mentioned, posturing. It is making myself look big, and it's a threat. Hey, go away, don't come. Otherwise, and what we need to remember is it's all posturing. The big hope there is this whole posturing works so that I don't have to bite. We need to remember that true violence in an animal's world hurts them, regardless of whether they win or lose the fight. True violence. So for instance, if there are street dogs, if they fight with each other, regardless of who won the fight, if you have injuries, you can get maggot wounds and you can die. Right. And this is the reality of the animal world in general. If you sustain injuries, you are at a very high risk of infection and death and, infestation also.
I mean, one example that I can think of, for example, is bees, right? Bees, when they sting you, they actually end up dying.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There are actually animals that actually are designed to die once they deliver that deadly sort of, attack. And even if they don't, getting into an actual fight is extremely expensive for animals. And so almost all of them tend to have these distance creating signals, which are kind of meant to they say all bark, no bite, right? That kind of a thing. It's meant to make yourself look big and menacing. So a classic way to recognize a distance creating signal is the animal tends to look bigger. So, or more menacing. So the snake with the hood up and spread out, or a cat that kind of curves up with all the fur sticking out. It's called piloerection, all the fur sticking out. So they kind of look bigger, more menacing, the hissing sound. You might have seen of certain lizards that kind of have a flap that they flare out. And, the way they curl their lips back and show the full extent of their teeth. It's all of that is a lot of posturing that's being brought into play with the hope that please, let there not be an actual fight. And this is something that we really need to understand, because a lot of us mistake that for, sort of aggressive behavior. It's really defensive behavior. What it is, remember I told you behavior serves a function. The function that distance creating signals serve, the function that they serve is these are behaviors that are inserted between fear or terror and violence and harm. So it's meant to, when the animal feels fearful, it's meant to be placed right in between so that they don't go in for that direct violence or direct biting. It's kind of a fail-safe to keep them away, to keep them safe. So there are examples, in the animal world. I mentioned several of them. Dogs have them too. We seem to often forget that. So before we look at, what are the distance creating signals in dogs, I want to remind you just one more time, distance creating signals are behaviors inserted between terror and harm. Please keep that in mind while I talk to you about distance creating signals in dogs, because often this is misinterpreted. This is one of those very typical frequent myths. So distance creating signals in dogs, typically what are behaviors where they make themselves look more menacing? Growling, lunging, snarling, air snapping, showing of the teeth. These are all distance, and dogs too have to certain extent piloerection. So, raising of the hackles, some dogs more than the others. So kind of puff up a little bit. So these are all distance creating signals, and they are signals that are inserted between terror and harm. People frequently mistake this for anger, but it's highly unlikely that this is actually anger. They're not acting out of anger, because anger is often a state of lack of emotional regulation, which means that they don't necessarily waste time warning you. They go for it. They go for the bite. The fact that they're taking a step back and giving you a warning means that it's not coming from a place of, they've not lost it. It's not done yet. They are regulating and they are trying to communicate something. And like all animals, it is, I need space. I need create distance. Interestingly, with most animals, I see that people know when they see distance creating signals, you back off. If you see a snake with a hood up, you back off. If you see a street dog go grrr, you back off. Only with our pet dogs, we reduce the distance. We fail to recognize the signal. We reduce the distance. We further close the gap rather than increase the gap. And that leads to a bite. Because this is the warning that the animal is giving, saying, back off, otherwise I feel like I might have to bite. Please don't put me in that situation, back off. They're giving you that last warning for whatever reason, but that is the warning. We misinterpret that. We incorrectly map that. We take offense at it because we have incorrectly mapped it. We have mapped it as anger, and we take offense that our dog is getting angry at us. How dare he? And we yell, we scold, we get bitten. I can't tell you the number of cases I've had where people walk in and say, dog was growling, so I scolded him and he bit. And I'm like, that's what I would have expected. All animals do that. If a snake has his hood up and you go and say, hey, how dare you? Let's see how that's going to go. Not very well, I'm guessing. Right. So let's take a quick case study to see how this is happening. Oh, wait, I might be on the wrong screen. I'm trying to, this is the first time I'm giving this talk, so I'm a little, this particular presentation. Okay, so typically what we see that's happening is the narrative that people give us is dog is bad. So I punish the dog. Now, when you get angry at the dog and you yell at the dog and yell at any animal, what you're going to see is what people usually say is the dog got angry because I punished the dog. So I scolded him. He bit me. He's an aggressive dog. This is a very common narrative that I get. Now, I'm going to look at this differently, okay? It's not dog is bad. It's that the dog is offering a behavior that I don't like for whatever reason, right? Dog is just being dog, but you don't like that behavior. You look at it as punishment, but what the dog is experiencing is the dog is scared and intimidated. An animal, any animal where human beings yell at the animal, that animal gets intimidated. Dog is no exception. Dog is not angry. The dog is giving distance creating signals. It's not anger. Remember what I told you. So you further increase fear, and the dog eventually bit. That is because it's the ultimate defense of the dog. So it's a whole different narrative that emerges if you actually use the right words. So it's not necessarily an aggressive dog. It's actually a dog that has been traumatized. Because we get bitten, we fail to see the trauma of the dog. It is traumatic when we get bitten. I have gotten bitten. It is very traumatic for us. But let's not forget, when animals get into conflict with human beings, it's always traumatic for the animals too. Because animals in the history of humankind have not fared well when they have gotten into conflict with human beings. So it's wired into them to not appreciate this kind of an engagement. And we have to recognize that.
One common case that I hear of very often is that a dog was going for a walk. He seemed fairly harmless. And I went ahead and just tried to pat it, and it bit me. It did not give me any distance creating signal. right? This is something that I hear often. I mean, I've heard of many people having faced this. I don't know why I'm so good with dogs. I have 5 dogs at home. There was this Alsatian which was walking on leash, and I just started petting him and he bit me, right? So why do some cases they don't give these distance creating signals?
Many reasons, and maybe by the end of the talk, some might become a little obvious. First and foremost, many people do not recognize distance creating signal. They don't see it at all. They see what they want to see, right? And we tend to see the louder of the signals. So we don't necessarily see it. 2, if animals get started, there is no time to signal. So often they can bite. 3, if they're not in an emotional state of regulation, they're not in a place where they're able to warn or do anything. So that's the internal state that they're in. So, for instance, most days I might be polite and have, if somebody talks to me and upsets me, I might have an acceptable way of kind of, expressing it. But there may be days when I'm so wired up that I just snap and it looks so out of place. But that's the emotional state that I'm in. We forget that animals too have emotional state. And second thing is, we have no business walking up to animals and touching them. Body autonomy, guys. You don't touch women, you don't touch children, you don't touch men, you don't touch animals. You seek consent. Just because they are not like us doesn't mean that they don't appreciate body autonomy. So when I usually touch dogs, I offer myself, I express that I'm interested, and I wait for the dog to come to me. And if the dog says no, it's a no. Somehow we seem to forget that with dogs. Okay, we'll dive a little bit deeper and you'll see what I mean. So let's take, we kind of jump in a little bit deeper and another case study. When we say dog is bad, and I don't like this animal's behavior, what behavior are we seeing? What is it? So frequently the behaviors that people, kind of talk to me about is, let me just take the screen off, dog is barking excessively, dog is, destroyed something, dog is peeing all over the place, dog is chewing up things, dog is reacting to other dogs very poorly. So these are kind of very, dog is running around like a mad dog and bumped into things and broke everything. He's too excited. He's not listening to me at all. So I got angry and I yelled at him. So this is a very common thing. So let's take one example, and I have videos of it. So I'd like to take this as an example. Zoomies, right? Many of you have heard zoomies, dog running madly in wild circles, right? And when they run in wild circles like that, if you are living in a apartment with a lot of nice things in it, something or the other is going to get broken and it is not going to end well, right? And so we yell at the dog. Now let's do a double click on it, right? What are zoomies? Why are they happening? And what should we be doing? Lots of misinformation about it. And, the dog is too excited. You haven't exercised the dog enough. All kinds of stuff are told to you, But again, all of this is misinformation. That's not necessarily one reason for it, but I'm going to explore one angle. So you see how thin a slice I'm cutting to look at, and that should tell you how kind of complicated this whole thing is. So we spoke about emotional needs driving behavior, right? So we look at can emotional needs drive zoomies? Absolutely. So let's say that the animal is experiencing emotions like excitement or anxiety. These are emotions that frequently increase certain chemicals in the body. And one of the more popular ones that most people recognize is adrenaline. Now, when there is a sudden surge of adrenaline, there are a few things that happen. Many of us have experienced this too. There is a increased need for restlessness. That's why we tend to pace, we talk fast, we may just chew this, that kind of fidgety restlessness. On top of it, when it is so much adrenalization, such a huge jump, what might you do when you're extremely excited? India won a match. Yay! That kind of, that frenzied movement, or when you're terrified, somebody suddenly spooked you and you screamed. These are big movements. You see kind of lot of movement, frenzy involved, and a huge amount of kind of energy that's coming out. And that is very similar to what we see in zoomies. It's this kind of adrenalization that's happening. And a very rapid and fast and intense adrenalization, and that is causing the zoomies. So it's a coping behavior. Like I said, biting the nails or running around, zoomies is a coping behavior. So it's not bad behavior, it's biology. We can't forget that. And there's a reason for it. You'll now start seeing it kind of cascade. So what different animals have different kind of coping behaviors that are part of their ethogram. I'm introducing a new term here, and I'm going to take a moment, again, geek alert, taking a moment to explain what I mean by ethogram. I'm going to put that up on your screen so that you get my words clearly. What are coping behaviors in a dog's ethogram? Well, what is an ethogram to start with? An ethogram is a catalog of behaviors that is part of that animal's repertoire. So for instance, climbing a tree is part of a monkey's ethogram, not part of a dog's ethogram. Barking, part of a dog's ethogram, not part of a monkey's ethogram. Zoomies is a part of a dog's ethogram, not human beings. Children do it a little bit, but adult human beings, we don't zoom. We may scream and jump up and down. Dogs don't scream and jump up and down. They zoom. So remember that each animal has their catalog of behaviors. And so for example, in a dog, when they get excited, you might see zoomies, but you might also see kind of shredding things up. They might jump on us. They might nip, barking, howling. These are all result of adrenalization, and they are coping behaviors. When we look at it that way, it doesn't sound right that we punish them, right? It's a coping behavior. They just engage. Would you punish a monkey for climbing a tree? It's just monkey behavior. This is just dog behavior. So what should we be doing instead? That's where we need to, we do a double take on it, right? We ask ourselves, okay, if this is a result of adrenalization, why did adrenalization happen in the first place? That's the next logical step. So I'll give you another case study. I have a little bit of a video to show you. This is classical zoomies. You see how aimless it is? Thoughtless, aimless behavior. Right? This is what we call zoomies.
So this happens every day at my house, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of enjoy it, although our sofa does not enjoy it at all. So
yes.
This one jumps onto the sofa, does this, then comes back.
So, yeah, absolutely. Right. Now, this actually happened, one of the days. This is my dog on my farm. So one of the days when I returned, she was doing this. Now, we need to ask ourselves why this is even happening, and that will reveal to us where the problem is. So before we dive into why this might have happened with Chiru, and if I were worked with your dog, I would do a similar analysis, right? Why is it happening? So before I do that, there are two things you need to know about adrenalization. Number one, excitement and stress cause adrenalization. Keep that in mind, because they both impact each other very significantly. And the second thing is, three things actually. The second thing is that they have a compounding effect, which means, let's say that I wake up in the morning and I've woken up late. I'm stressed. Adrenalization starts. I start driving. Bangalore traffic, more stress. You don't return to baseline and climb up again. Stress increases. Somebody cuts you off. It goes up from here. It doesn't go back down, and it's not down, up, down, up. You don't come back down that easily from stress. You remain up and then you climb up from there. and then your boss comes and says something terrible, it shoots up there. And worst case, when is the whole spillover going to happen? When you least expect it, because it's, and most likely when you come back home, right? With our loved ones. That's where we completely melt. And it has nothing to do with that last trigger. It has to do with the fact that it has been compounding all day. So remember that about adrenalization. Excitement and stress and anxiety cause it. And the other thing you need to remember is they kind of bounce off each other. What does that mean? I'll explain to you. So what happened in Chiru's case? Why was she zooming like that? First of all, separation. All social animals tend to get a little nervous when they're separated from their human beings, when they, separated from people in their family. That's normal. It's separation angst. That's a normal part of social beings. We all experience that a little. They're supposed to experience that little, not feeling so good. On top of that, that particular day, I was late coming back. Dogs have an internal clock. So that anxiety is now going higher. It's compounding. Okay. There's another thing that Chiru gets triggered by a lot, which is electricity. If I lose electricity and my inverter turns on, for some reason, Chiru is terrified of it. I don't need to figure out why, but I know that she's terrified when the inverter turns on and off. It makes that tuck, tuck noise and she is terrified. So chances are that when I was not at home, electricity went and came or something has happened. She has compounded. Okay. Then she's already up here and I come home. Lots of excitement. Now that's also going to add, and I said it bounces off. So her excitement is not building up from ground up. It bounces off and it's building up from this level. Why is this really important to remember, this bounce off effect? Because when she is zooming like that, normally Chiru is excellent with other dogs. Out here on the farm, we have lots of kind of farm dogs walking around. She's very, very good with them. But in that zooming state, if she had seen another dog, no emotional regulation, excitement up to here, she would have charged after that dog. And if the dog got nervous and said grr, this level of excitement suddenly bounces off and it is this level of anxiety. I get a fight. Or if I had yelled at her, this level of excitement suddenly bounces off and it becomes that level of anxiety and you get a bite. So you see, that could be another explanation for the case that you mentioned. It could be that the dog is wired up and has nothing to do with you having touched the dog. Something has wired the dog up. Something has maybe even excited the dog. Who knows? And it might look like, hey, he had such a great day and then he bit me. I don't understand. This is the bounce off and the compounding effect that's happening. So when the dog is so excited and you spook the dog, you get that level of anxiety. You don't get normal base level. And excitement and anxiety don't cancel each other. They feed each other. And this, I think a lot of people make a mistake. And that is why this kind of cascading effect, and it kind of, backfires very badly. So now, what do I do? Again, please remember, I can't give you all kinds of solutions. I'm just sharing a very small slice of what can be done. What do I do in this case? I don't know if you can see and observe. Let's see if you can notice what I'm doing here to calm her down. This is another instance where she was zooming. And it looks so cute, right? I mean, it's just so cute. Now start noticing how her eyes start softening. Her breathing is slowing down. There she goes. Look at that. The eyes is softening more. There. This is a very nice kind of a neck massage that works to calm her down quite well. And she then kind of starts offering different parts of her body where she feels that will help her emotionally regulate. because she is struggling to emotionally regulate. That's kind of her challenge. So you can notice the same effect here as well. This is the earlier video that I showed you. She was zooming like crazy. So she herself calmed down a little bit, but the second she sees me again, she starts wiring up. And I wish I had the audio. When I talk with a high-pitched tone, she was zooming again. She was starting to zoom again. But as soon as I started, I kept quiet, shut my mouth. And again, there with the neck. And you can see how she's beginning to calm down. Her breathing is slowing down. Okay. So these are kind of things that I think there's some things in the chat I have. Yeah, you're kind of going to keep the questions. They'll come back to it later. That makes sense.
There's one relevant question right now, which is like, what about exciting the dog further by playing with them during a Zoomies episode? Nestor is asking this.
You've hit the question, right? You know the answer to the question. The fact that you're asking it means you know the answer to the question. You're going to wire them up. You're going to wire them up higher and higher and higher. We need to bring them back down. And the reason I need to bring her back down, okay, it looks terribly cute. That zooming is so cute that I don't want to stop it. And I'm not saying I want to stop it. I'm not saying, hey, stop, don't do it. I will enjoy it while you do it, but I will enjoy it as quietly and calmly as possible. So if what I'm going to try and do is maybe today I will put up the video, this video on my social network, on Bach's social network as a story, so you can hear how I'm engaging as well with the audio. And you will see that as soon as this excitement in my voice, I say, yeah, cute, immediately it increases again. So I try my best to enjoy the moment as quietly as possible. My teacher used to say, stick 4 chewing gums in your mouth and shut up. So, we are very verbal, loud species, and we can't get ourselves to shut up. But with animals, it's a very useful thing to learn not to, use that. Remain as calm as possible, enjoy it for, as long as it lasts, but also bring them down, as nicely and gently as possible. That neck massage is something that really helps her a lot to bring her down. And the reason I want to bring her down is if I have another trigger while she's in that state, then I'm in trouble. If she sees another dog while she's in that state, it can get into a fight. I have a lot to gain with her back down at baseline. This is, of course, the immediate thing that I'm explaining. Of course, if you come into my classes, I will be talking for months and months on end about the long-term impact on the body of the dog if you keep them up in that wired up state. It decreases their wealth. I mean, their health. Health is wealth. So I suppose it decreases their health and unravels their body and mind, and they get less and less able to emotionally regulate. They are not as smart. They're not able to think. They're not able to problem solve. And therefore, it's really important to kind of, we were talking before we started this, right? The idea of slow dog movement, slowing down. Even for us, we know this now. Staying on the fast lane all the time, staying excited all the time, it's leading to heart attacks. It's leading to our lifespan, reducing. It's leading to all kinds of issues. And brain chemistry is brain chemistry. Okay, the parts that have to do with things like adrenaline and kind of coping strategies and all that is the same. Human beings, or it's kind of called reptilian part of the brain, right? And reptilian meaning all the way from reptiles. We have inherited that part. It's not unique to us. It's a part that we inherited. And so it's very important to remember that just as we struggle, and for us, we talk about, take deep breaths, meditate, calm down, slow down. Don't take decisions when you're angry. Don't take decisions when you're excited, because our cognitive processes they're kind of useless when you're in that heightened state. And it's the same for dogs. I count a lot on dogs using their own intelligence to be able to deal with the world around them. And for that, you have to make their intelligence shine. You can't keep them in this crazy state all the time and expect that they'll take good decisions. They always take terrible decisions. And of course, there's a whole other anatomy angle that I can go into, which I won't right now, which is that kind of crazy running can lead to a lot of micro tears and injuries, which over time start compounding, leading to early onset of arthritis. Therefore, it's very critical that we do not encourage, we don't discourage either, but we don't encourage this state of mind where they're zooming or shredding things up, or, we try to calm them down. Calming them down can take a few different forms. Like you saw, the massage that I do, that works really well for her, but I'm trained in massage for dogs. But you can try kind of tactile input with your dogs. Some of you may be really good and may be able to figure this out on your own. We also use things like sniffing, chewing, licking, giving them something to sort of, we call it treat search, or giving them something to just like a raw meaty bone or something that they can sit and chew. These are self-soothing activities that they can do. So after the massage, I may follow that up with a treat search or something. So it's further coming down. Treat search, sniffing activities. Pranayama helps us too. Very similar principles. Breath regulates the nervous system in the body. Okay, very, very simply put. Some of you know the details of this. Yeah, the ANS and PSNS and all that. So we use those. And then the last level of changes, usually if you get a professional, this is what the professional should be doing, is lifestyle changes. So looking at your lifestyle. So in Chiru's case, for example, the case study that we looked at, for example, can I get a sitter instead of leaving her home alone, especially on the days that I'm going to be late? That might help reduce the anxiety that is leading to this over-adrenalization. Another interesting change, for instance, I told you she is terrified of the UPS, the inverter going tuck, tuck, turning on and off. So now what I do is before I leave, I unplug the UPS. She's not very afraid of the electricity going. It's the UPS turning on and off that's her problem. So I unplug the UPS. I do want her to have a little bit of light. So I have a solar charged light now. So that sits inside the house that I turn on, and I have a rechargeable fan. So I charge everything. So this is my plan. When I have to leave for the day, I have a rechargeable fan running. I have a solar light running, and everything else is disconnected. That's such a unique solution, right? I mean, it's not like you can attend any talk where they will actually give you this solution is very specific to my house, my dog, my problem, my solution. And that is kind of why I insist that, some of you may have to actually, it's not a very overarching, a lot of people will message me saying, I have a problem. Can you give me a solution? And message me on Instagram. I hope now you're beginning to understand the depth of this. It's not that simple, right? So the last part of it, we're kind of almost out of time. So the last part of it is what causes over-adrenalization. Many of the problem behaviors that you guys see are because of over-adrenalization, chewing things up and destroying things, excessive barking, reactivity, biting. They're all a result of kind of lack of emotional regulation because of sustained over-adrenalization. So if you get a professional, what they are likely to do is they're going to start at the kind of bitey end of the problem, right? You'll go to a professional when the adrenalization has gone so high that one day, your dog has lost it, bit at a very, you don't even understand why, what led that bite. Like you rightly mentioned, I didn't even do anything. I'm a dog lover. I love this dog. Somebody who came home who loves the dog, and the dog bit. So that's when you go to a professional and they start at that bitey end and they start working backwards. As pet parents, you can start at the other end. You don't have to start at the bitey end and work backwards. You look at your lifestyle, the way I looked at my lifestyle. What are the things that are adding? What are the excitement and anxiety things that are adding and increasing this adrenalization? In my dog's case, for the zoomies, it was me coming home late, and the electricity. So at least those two things I could change. So that kind of an examination of your life. What is leading to this? What leads to my dog? What are the different things? And that, remember, will take slow observation. This is the slow part again. It'll take you time to sit and observe and say, it took me a long time to understand that she was that terrified about the inverter, because she doesn't give a big reaction. What Chiru does when the inverter turns on and off is she will just quietly get up and walk off to another room. So I didn't realize at all that it was adrenalizing her until, and this is actually my late husband who was very good at observing, and he's the one who kind of pointed out that she gets really upset by this, to the point where she'll walk away from her food and can't eat her food either. And that was an interesting thing. It took me a while to figure out. So lifestyle changes that you can make in order to figure that out. First thing, you're going to look for triggers, excitement and anxiety triggers, and then start looking at what are things you can change. Second thing that leads to over-adrenalization. You already asked that question, and it's here. Our emotions. Our emotions adrenalize our dogs like you cannot believe. And the worst part of this is we are also highly adrenalized most of the time. So we are also on the edge of anger, or we are overly excited. And we are passing that on, and dogs they're like sponges. They just take it on, and they don't understand it either. So it compounds in them. And it's very hard for us not to be emotional. Our lives are like that. But if we are conscious of it, maybe we can find ways to express it differently, mask it, hide our dogs from it, something, insulate our dogs from it, just change a few habits, maybe. Like you said, maybe when I'm seeing the dog zoom, I don't have to add to that. That I can avoid.
So actually, after today's discussion, the first time I'm aware that this is actually not necessarily a good thing, because in general, because they look so cute, etc. I personally, in order to get him excited, I just need to look at him with some sort of a funny eye, and that's it. And then, so I didn't actually realize that it might actually be bad, right?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah. And that's because we have images are built in our head that a dog is a very excitable animal. And so that's the Walt Disney image in our head. And so we try to build to that image, and we don't see any problem with that. But my studies on street dogs have frequently shown me that street dogs rarely have that kind of, hyped up levels, or that frenzy. They're not that kind of wired up animals. They're calm. Animals in the animal kingdom in general are calm. Only our pet dogs are this crazy hyped up kind of, animals. In fact, what's really interesting is out here on the farm, there's one dog that tends to be a little hyper. And recently I found out that he was apparently a pet dog in one of the villages and got abandoned. It's really interesting for me that when dogs come in contact with human beings and become pet dogs, immediately they become hyper. That's because we're kind of getting them there. And when they become hyper, their judgment drops. Their social skills drop. Their communication drops. A street dog is so good at taking great decisions. A street dog can even cross the streets on Bangalore. Can our pet dogs do it? Heck no. A street dog knows so well what to avoid, what not to avoid, who to avoid, how to engage with each other. They rarely get into fights. There's no training. Nobody is going around telling them, treats and clicker and this and that, but they engage with dogs so beautifully, avoid conflict so beautifully. They manage such a stressful life. Our dogs, oh my God, they look so dumb in front of street dogs. And when I see, because I study communication, when I see our dogs' communication versus street dog communication, street dogs are like so subtle, and their communication signals are so
Evolved.
Barely they're nuanced and subtle. And our dogs are like the rowdies, uncouth rowdies that walk into this fancy party with the heck, and that's how our dogs behave. And that's because we kind of keep them in that state. And that is why they're not able to manage things like dealing with other dogs and stressful situations. And so easy for them to kind of, fall off that thing and kind of completely flip out.
Somebody's asking, what about zoomies after a bath?
Yeah. And that's again, right? What are the triggers? Bath is often a trigger for dogs. Very few people realize that animals are not wired to be bathing. So we love our, Sunday head bath kind of a thing. And we do that for our dogs too. But think about it. Street dogs, how don't you see that most street dogs look very miserable when it's raining and they try to hide? There's a reason for it, because their coats are wired to resist water. But when water enters, and if you pound them with water, water will enter, and they don't leave their skin that easily, which means that they can get, mildew and fungal infection and things like that. So most animals with fur don't like to get wet. So some dogs do, and that's okay. There's personalities all over the place. But some dogs retain the doggedness. They hate it. Chiru hates it. We wash dogs because we think, oh, they smell like human beings. We have to wash them. Dogs don't sweat, guys. They don't have body odor. They don't sweat on their body. They sweat only under their paws. If any of you have been around horses, for instance, you know how much animals that sweat stink. Horses can really smell bad. Dogs don't smell like horses because they only sweat in very few places. They don't sweat on their body. They don't have BO. The smell that you often get from dogs is because of dander and dead fur, which can be easily removed by brushing. And your dog will be quite odorless. So they don't actually need a bath. And I had this realization hit me when I was traveling. I studied in Europe, particularly about dogs. And in Europe, especially in the countryside, in Scandinavian countries, nobody washes dogs ever. They laugh. And then I kept thinking, okay, nobody washes any other animal, actually. It's only dog that we weekly sit and scrub. And I have stopped washing my dog. She also hates bath. She acts like I'm washing her with acid instead of water. And I said, I'm done. I don't want to stress you out. I don't want to stress myself out. I'm going to brush you. If you stink too much, I might take something and, put on you. And that's okay. If you roll in something disgusting, that day you and I shall, have to tolerate this. But otherwise, no, I don't need the Sunday head bath kind of a thing. Chumpy and head bath is not required for a dog. Okay, that's something to. So like I said, lots of myths are out there that can often hurt us, and that can lead to over-adrenalization. That very nicely segues into the myths section. Some of the very popular myths that tend to over-adrenalize, over-stimulating activities, just the way we talk to them and any activity that we do with them. Hi, yes, our tone itself starts up there and goes higher up. And the way we react, you mentioned, just if I look at him, it's not just if you look at him, the way you look at him. Everything, right? You're stimulating, you're doing that. Over-exercising, another myth. Dogs need a lot of exercise, so over-exercise them. Not true. My entire study, the reason I started getting into research was what I did is I looked at what is called activity budget of street dogs to see how much do animals move, how much do dogs move. And like all predators, dogs don't move that much. They move limited. In my entire activity budget, half of the activity budget was dedicated to sleep. Sleep. Dogs sleep a lot. Less than 30%, less than 25% was to do with movement. And when I say movement, I include walking, trotting, pooping, peeing, running, playing. Movement was less than 30% or 25%. Huge part. And all predators are like this. If you think back to your National Geographic videos, most tigers sitting, sleeping, lots and lots and lots of times of that. Short bursts of hunting, maybe, rarely for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Most times once in a few days. And most of the others is non-frenzied activity. Lots of sitting and looking, lots of sleeping, and lots of calm exploring. It's the same thing that we need to do for dogs. Again, that's kind of where the slow movement comes in. slow dogs, slow them down. We do slow walks, as much sniffing as possible. We walk as slowly as possible. Sometimes we don't cover more than 500 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters. A dog can sniff a lot in 100 meters. And slow movement, any of you who gym knows this, slow movement is what builds muscle. Rapid movement is momentum based, it tears muscle. Slow movement, where they walk slowly and they sniff and they pick their legs up, works their core. And when they sniff, that's a beautiful movement. I also am a canine myotherapist, which means I do like physiotherapy for dogs. And when dogs have stiff muscles and things like that, we need to get them to do the equivalent of stretches. And sniffing, touching the nose to the ground, please go ahead and bend and touch your feet, touch your toes and see which are all the muscles that move, right down to the hams, ankles, everything, all the way down to your feet. It's a beautiful long stretch. And when you do slow stretches, slow balance, principles that yoga is built on, you build muscle and strength in the muscle and range in the muscle. You really don't need fast movement. Fast movement is damaging. Slow, deliberate movement builds strength and muscle.
So when, for example, we see people who have, let's say, a Dalmatian, right? Very often, you have a Dalmatian, you need to really take it out for, take it out somewhere and then let him really run around, etc. Otherwise, he'll have too much of energy and he'll come back and he'll tear stuff. That's again a standard thing that we hear quite often.
Yeah, right? It's one of those most popular myths around there. Saying that a Dalmatian has a lot of energy, or any dog has a lot of energy, and you burn it out is a bit like they're not Duracell bunnies. It's not that there's this much energy and then you burn and it gets empty. Not at all. Quite the contrary, the more you exercise them, exercising metabolism is the function of utilizing resources to generate energy. So when we exercise, so many people in the world exercise first thing in the morning, not because they want to burn themselves out the first thing in the morning. It's because it pumps them up first thing in the morning. It gives them that, that it pumps them up. And so exercise actually doesn't bring us down. It does bring us up. And depending on how much exercise we do, we kind of remain in that state of over-adrenalization. And so, how much exercise do dogs need? Most of the times, the dogs move around enough. You really don't need to do much. If you're doing a walk, one good, 20-minute walk, don't rush them through it. Do it slowly. They get the movement that's necessary. Do any of your dogs need to be told not, please run? Most of your dogs do that anyways. They do it in the house. And another thing that very few of us realize is our dogs move a lot. You and me, we've probably been sitting here for close to an hour now. Most of our dogs would have gotten up at least once in this period of time. Most. And they get up and walk around. And if you have multiple people in the house, every time one person gets up and walks, they get up and walk behind that person. So they get up and walk way more than any of us do. So most of the exercise needs are met. The needs that are not met, that's the one you need to focus on, which is calming down, slowing down, slow movement, muscle building, balance exercises, thinking, sniffing, chewing. These are things I'm guessing most of you rarely do. But this is what bulk of their ethogram dogs do it. But that we do very little of, and exercise we do way more of. Your dogs are getting most exercises. Anyways, I won't stress out on that. I would rather look at the other question, which is how do I calm them down? What kind of activities can we do? So just a quick reminder before I move to the very last slide that I have, I'm just going to share the screen.
So we have time till 5:30 actually. We have time till 5:30.
Yeah, I'll take questions, right?
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. So most things that over-adrenalize, look at the triggers, pay close attention. This is going to be very unique to you and your dog. So this is something I can't give you more examples of. I've given you a few examples. Look for them, okay? Emotions. Watch out. Your emotions, our emotions. they impact the dog. And this is a very difficult thing to actually deal with because we all struggle with emotions. But please watch out for that. And the third is myths. Over exercising, punishing your dogs for reasons where they should not be punished, punishing your dogs, being told, oh, your dog is dominant. No, it's not that. Often what you see is distance creating signals. Oh, your dog is being angry, your dog is being a bad dog, you have to punish them, you have to scare them. I've seen people give advice like throw chappal at the dog, throw bottles with coins in it, like all kinds of stuff. It harkens back to kind of parenting that are, you know where I'm going with that, right? No, come with it with compassion, come with it with scientific understanding. Where is this behavior coming from? There's a difficulty with emotional regulation most times. Deal with that. The more you punish your dog mindlessly and angrily, the more likely that your dog is either going to bite or shut down. The fact that you're attending this talk tells me that you care about this. You don't want your dog to shut down. So think twice, think thrice, and then think again if you feel like you have to punish. Last set of reasons that I haven't covered here, and the reason I haven't covered here is because of the depth of information that's required. And this is something that you will need professionals for. Health. 90% of the dogs that I have seen, and I'm being very conservative when I say 90%, have health issues. Hip issues, chronic pain, digestion issues, skin issues are so common. It's partly breeding, partly the breed itself, just the notion of the breed, partly lifestyle, our flooring, the jumping up and down. Remember, I dropped a bomb earlier, right? Micro tears can cause early onset of arthritis. Now, that kind of damage that continues to create chronic pain in dogs, and sadly, chronic pain in early stages often results in hyperactive dogs. People don't expect that. People think that when the dog is in pain, the dog is going to sit down and look sad. We are the drama queens that way, drama queens or kings or whatever you want. We are the ones who go, oh, I'm in pain. Everybody, animals need to be stoic. They need to hide their pain and keep moving. And their need, dogs in particular, their need to keep up with us is so high that they will pump themselves up to stay up with us. And that pumping themselves up is adrenalization. And adrenaline, interestingly, numbs pain. So if you meet with an accident, for example, for an hour after that, you're not going to feel at all where and all you're hurt. 1 hour later is where you'll realize, oh, I'm hurt. Sports stars on the field rarely will realize they have injured themselves. The pain comes and hits after because of the pain numbing properties of adrenaline. There's a reason for it. So they induce that in themselves in order to keep up. When they are hyper, they don't feel the pain. It's a good state for them to be. So as long as they can keep themselves in that state, they will. And this is where you need a professional so that you can actually deal with the pain rather than keeping the dog hyper. The second thing is trauma. Many animals that have history of trauma often will struggle with emotional regulation, and they will do that bounce off very fast and the compounding very fast. And that definitely needs professional help. One thing that you have noticed me not mention, and it should be very evident, is breed. I never mentioned breed as a reason for over-adrenalization or as an impact on behavior. And breed does impact behavior, but not in the way it is frequently portrayed. Oh, Rottweiler, aggressive dog. Doberman, aggressive dog. No, that's not the way it impacts. What are the things that trigger them? Can change from breed to breed. Chiru is an alerting dog. Somebody in our pin code will trigger her. Whereas Rottweilers are guarding dogs. Somebody who walks into the property also doesn't trigger them as much as somebody walking out of the property really triggers them. Right? So what triggers them can change, and how it triggers them and what coping behaviors they use. A dog like Chiru will do zoomies. A dog like Nishi, my older dog, she used to be a jumper. Some dogs, beagles, tend to be howlers. Some dogs are barkers. Some dogs are shredders. They all are reacting to adrenalization slightly differently, based on their breed. But it's not that a breed is aggressive. It's what impacts them that actually changes breed by breed. But at the same time, personality of the individual overrides the breed. So when people say, oh, this dog is a Dalmatian, he will need this, that's a bit like saying, oh, you're a Kannadiga, that means you're like this. Now, to some extent, there is truth to it, but not really. Right? And that's what we need to see. At the end of the day, we need to recognize them as individuals and not use these labels and generalizations. It doesn't help us kind of get under the hood of the behavior. So that is sort of the overview. And I really hope that you kind of got the idea of the reason I really can't get into the details is you can see the depth of what goes into it. So I will take questions. Before I do, just one last thing. If any of you liked this talk and enjoyed it and would like to show your appreciation, please consider making a donation to CARE. It's one of those organizations that does remarkable work for dogs of the city. And I think we owe organizations like this little something, a little love. So whatever little you can make, please do it in, yeah, that's it. All right. That's it. Let's take questions.
So I'll start reading out some of the questions. So one is, I think, from May Organic Farms. So he's actually a farm near Chennai, right? He sells his butter and ghee on Farmism, right? So I think one fine day, he was a professional who one fine day said, I'm going to get into farming, right? So that's May Organic Farms history. So he says, I have Kombai dogs on my farm, and they're refusing to let anybody else near them. And that's why he's not able to travel. They don't let anybody else care for them. They are working dogs. So do you have any suggestions, or how should we look at that?
Yeah, like I said, I definitely won't be able to give, answers to very
it's
specific...
kind of like asking it's asking a doctor over a Zoom call.
Hey,
yeah. So there is more.
But I'll shed a little light on this. Working dogs, a lot of times when we keep them in a state where they need to work, they tend to be over adrenalized. So and it's a big part of that thing. The reason they're able to hunt or guard is because they're in that kind of wired up state. So if we want them, we have to pick what we want of them. We can't say, I would like them to be working and guarding and, cuddly and happy with people. You either get this or you get that. And so if you kind of want them to be a bit more friendly and okay with people, then you need to start looking at their lifestyle, looking at triggers and looking at what is kind of keeping them up in that wired up state, and increasing sleep drastically. Remember, dogs have a need for sleep that can go up to even 20 hours. So we see 16 to 20 hours of sleep that dogs need. And a lot of times working dogs, farm dogs that are kept outside don't necessarily get that sleep. And when they don't get that sleep, they're extremely wired up animals. So that's probably where I would start trying to see how we can induce and increase sleep. And definitely I think you'll hit a point where you might need a professional. That's one of those cases. It's a little difficult, particularly farm dogs, right? It's a little difficult to manage that, and you need professional help.
One more question that I had was, how do you, I think many of us probably have gone through that situation where, you get a puppy home, right? And then initially very nice, a little bit of poop here and there, all fine. But after that, it gets, the puppy usually grows to a stage where it starts tearing up stuff, right? And I have had sofas destroyed, curtains destroyed, bunch of stuff. So do we just kind of accept it as, hey, this is going to be part of the growing up process?
Yeah.
Or is there something that we could do to kind of...
Okay. So yes and yes, right? You accept it and you do something. So there is, I do accept it. I see it for what it is, especially between that around 8 months. Is 8 to about, say, 15 months is a rapid physical development phase. So they are in the stage where suddenly one day their legs have grown, tremendously long. They look so weird, right? Like teenagers, suddenly their head grows really big and the rest of the body is catching up. And so they are very unbalanced. They're flopping all over the place. You can see a teenage dog. They might be physically as big as an adult dog, but they're so uncoordinated and so floopy kind of a thing. And so helping them, and their brain is and even more of a mess, right? Teenagers, my teacher used to say, teenagers are teenagers, Sindhoor, no matter what the species. They're same set of problems you're going to have. Drama, mood swings, questioning of authority, really not. And most important of all, not knowing consequences of their actions. It's a big part of the juvenile phase. So their brain signals kind of are in a different directions altogether. And the last part of the brain to develop, true of human beings too. For human beings, it happens at 24 years. For dogs, it happens at 24 months. The last part to develop is the one that has to deal, the one right in front, which has to deal with understanding consequences. So they do ridiculous things, right? We know that teenagers do ridiculous things, human beings too. There's a reason for it. So what I would do is recognize it. Of course, it is part of growing up. There's nothing wrong with it. Provide for it. So I would probably take them, especially in the teenage phase, maybe take them to a space like parks, or in Bangalore. Best thing is drive out of city limits and you will hit, open spaces very easily. When I had an account with farms, then I would take my dogs to the farm. And what was beautiful on that farm, I have lovely videos. So it was tilled land, right? And walking on that tilled land needs a certain amount of body awareness, balance, and learning to balance and walk on different terrains can really slow down their, work their brain. It's called proprioceptive input, much like yoga. Why do we do balance exercises? Because balance exercises gives a huge amount of proprioceptive input to the brain. So exercises of that kind, don't make them do anything. Just take them to a place like a farm is perfect for it, right? Take them to a farm where there's probably tilled land. Take them to a place where there is, maybe a fallen tree, something to where they have to balance, walk this way, that way. Take them there maybe once in a week, once in 2 weeks. It's a nice picnic spot. Just you sit down, relax, carry your picnic hamper, relax, let them go do their thing and come back. You will see them pass out like a light. And you will not see that fallout and burning and, zoomies and all that. If you over exercise them, chances are after a short period of rest, they bounce back with an extraordinary amount of strength. Whereas if you ask them to give them opportunities to do balance exercises, you will see that bounce back, that rapid bounce back is missing. They will actually calm down. I will actively engage and give them puzzles to do, cardboard boxes to rip up, put some treats inside it. These days, you get things like snuffle mats, sniffer mats, for those of you who don't have a lawn, you can put treats in this kind of a shaggy carpet, get them to sniff. So a lot of activities like that, none of which require you to sit and engage with them for hours and hours. You give it to them, let them deal with it on your own. You don't add to the excitement. Sit back, go read a book, go do something on social media. Give them some activities like that. Pay attention to what it is that they're doing. If they want to shred, give them things to shred. Don't cry that they shredded your Ray-Ban, right? Like, give them something to shred. Give them something that they enjoy even more. Give them plenty of it. Give them something to chew on. They love chewing, and it releases a lot of endorphins in the body and brings down stress hormones and adrenaline and cortisol. So give them something to chew on. Feed them multiple times a day, because more full the tummy is, more sleepy you are, more sleep you're going to get. So feed them, and teenagers will burn through anything that you feed them. So you don't have to be worried about overfeeding them. You can feed them multiple times a day. Social activity, limited social activity. Teenagers tend to drive themselves crazy by, again, they bounce off each other a lot. So social activity is somewhat limited and with calm adult dogs. So during that period, it's not a free for all. And please don't keep your teenagers in the presence of other teenagers. Teenagers are the worst role models for each other. They're not good for each other. So don't socialize your teenage dogs with other teenage dogs. Juveniles together is just trouble. Get good, sensible, calm adult dogs short socialization sessions. And that's kind of how I would deal with that age. There's a cute meme that makes it around, right? So 0 to 8, 6 months, cute puppy. 24 months upwards, lovely dog. In the middle, dinosaur.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what juvenile phase is. And those of you who have teenage kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That is what that phase is. Okay. At least with your kids, it's 12 years. With dogs, it's 12 months. So accept it, but provide for it.
A slightly different question. I mean, given the fact that you're kind of now living in a farm, etc. Right. So one of the worries that a lot of pet parents have is around, especially if they're moving to a farm or if they're going out and staying somewhere, is that, hey, there might be snakes around.
Your audio dropped off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't hear. So the question is, like, what do you do when, like, people think that there are snakes around? Should I let my dog take loose, or should I?
Right. So obviously with snakes, you have to be extra careful. And so if you haven't gained the confidence with your dog, then, you know, you don't let the dogs out late in the night, and, you know, that kind of, you know, don't let them wander around without you supervising. But having said that, for me, it's not that much of a problem. And this is why kind of our way of dealing with things may sound very difficult in the beginning, and may sound like you need a lot of patience in the beginning, but it really pays off in the long run. Because like I repeated a few times, our way of working is to figure out how to improve the judgment of the dog and to increase the cognitive abilities of the dog. And that route that I have taken now with my dog, I am not worried at all, because I know, I've seen what she does when she sees a snake. She goes woof woof and comes running back to me. She's like, Mama, go take care of the problem. And thank you. That's exactly what I wanted. I don't want you to go and try to pick up the snake and come. That's not what I want. I want you to come and tell me so I can deal with it. Any problem that she sees, I think just yesterday I put up a story, I think, of a centipede. I was sitting and observing the centipede. She came and looked at it and she's like, whoa, not a good idea. And she walked away. It's a very interesting thing, actually. So most mammals are apparently wired to have fear of snake. It's not an inherent fear, but it's a one-time pickup fear. So see, most of us, we don't need to be taught that a snake is dangerous. With or without teaching, most animals, when they see snake, is one of those very interesting creatures in the living biological world, where most other animals, you know, kind of recoil from that something slithering. So it is in them to alert, to walk away, to no, this is dangerous. It is in their DNA. We have to bring that side out. We have to allow that side to, you know, develop. That is the reason why I keep saying, don't keep your dog in an adrenalized state. Bring them down, their cognitive abilities will increase. I want my dog is just so good now. If I keep the front door open, a lot of people ask me, if I keep the front gate open, doesn't your dog run away? My dog stands inside the gate and she looks and she's like, security breach, somebody do something about this. She's not going to step out. And that is the investment that I have put in to calm her down and to get her to use her brain.
There's one more question. Like you talked about adrenalization, etc. What's the, like, is there any impact on their diet and food? And do you have any tips on that?
So there is a two-way impact, obviously. So when animals are over adrenalized, just like human beings, they can go into hyperphagic or hypophagic, eat excess or not able to eat. In the human world, apparently 2/3 of stressed out people go hyper, which means they eat more, and 1/3 of people go hypo. They eat less. So a lot of dogs, you will see this, you will see them kind of gobble, 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 gobble. And some dogs, you will see, they turn into fussy eaters. Again, these kind of labels don't help at all. You have to look under the hood, and sometimes you will see that adrenalization is the problem. The flip side is also an interesting one. Food does impact adrenalization. You can reduce the effect or impact of adrenalization through food. Usually, fresh food goes a long way. Complex carbohydrates and fats tend to reduce the impact of adrenalization. So, not simple stuff, but complex stuff, heavy carbs and heavy fats can give you that food coma. No, you know, you have chefs on this. You know what happens when you eat a lot after your madhve uta, after your marriage meal. Nobody is getting into a fight. We all want to go nap. That is, again, it's simple physiology, simple biology. You can use that. Foods that require a lot of chewing, gnawing, that can increase endorphins, that has pain relieving properties. So dogs that have chronic pain will frequently ask for chewing. So giving them things like raw meaty bones, consult a nutritionist, and then giving them raw meaty bones can help to a huge degree to bring down adrenalization. So yeah, these are the things that help.
Somebody's asking, what about leaving dogs alone in the house for a few hours when we are out?
A lot of people feel so terribly guilty about it, but I tell them not to, because like I said, dogs need a lot of sleep, sometimes up to even 20 hours. And like I said, many dogs find it very, very difficult to sleep when we are home all the time, because we keep getting up and walking. And most of you have noticed, if you get up and walk, your dog is up. So they don't get their full sleep when we are around all the time. Actually, if people work from home, my bigger concern is for those guys. I tell them that you have to find a way to plan your day so that you're at your desk for a few hours at a time and don't get up and walk around, so that your dog gets the sleep. So don't feel guilty about it. Your dogs need to sleep and they need to catch up on it. The only thing is, not all of your dogs may have learned how to deal with you being out of the house. Like, I mentioned already, dogs are social animals, and social animals experience separation angst when we step away. And that's normal. And we need to slowly teach them, small little bit at a time, that when I step out, I will come back. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not going to go and die. Nothing is going to happen to me. So I would start with, 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, like that, doubling of the time, leaving the dog home alone and showing the dog, 1, I will come back before you panic. 2, you know how to cope. You're not helpless. You know how to cope with what's happening. Only a dog can figure that out for himself. There's nothing you and I can do about it. But we give them the challenge at the dose that they can handle and allow them to figure it out and say, oh, okay, I dealt with this, or I can do this. Then increase the challenge. You did that. You can do this. And usually it takes about, a few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, to get the dog to comfortably handle about 2 hours. From 2 hours to about 6 hours, they can get used to it quite quickly after that. 6 hours is usually their cap. Most dogs do struggle after 6 hours. So if you're doing more than 6 hours, I would recommend think of some lifestyle change. Either get a sitter coming in the middle of the day, break that, thing. They're coming in, they don't need to do anything with your dog. It's just come in, get a cup of coffee, sit down, read a book, go back. Just give the dog, something to connect and break that time. When my husband was alive, we would kind of, break the day so that I go early, finish early, come back early, he goes late, finishes, So that those kind of changes you can do and try to see that, they're not alone for too long. Some dogs can manage up to even 8, but you're pushing it. So if you're doing it, be aware of it, that you're pushing it, and don't do it too often.
Does canine behavior change? Does it work in reality? In the sense that if somebody, for example, has a biting problem, right, goes ahead and bites the milkman, bites somebody else, etc. How does a typical, how do you do therapy or behavior change? How do you how does that work, and how much time does it take if it actually works?
If it didn't work, I won't have a job. So yes, it does. And it's a bit like saying, if you have mental health issues, is there any way to change that? Yeah, of course there is. Brains are highly plastic organs. They change. We learn. We are learning beings. We change. And it's exactly, the building blocks are all what I spoke about here, right? If I walked into a situation where a dog is biting, the first thing I would do is I would start at the bitey end and start working backwards. What were the triggers? What happened today? What happened yesterday? What is the health history? What is the history of trauma that the dog is carrying? What are more than often more, there are lifestyle mistakes that you're making, myths. People are either over exercising, yelling, punishing, repeatedly exposing the dog to known triggers, over exciting, and this is resulting in a bite. So we make lifestyle changes, remove all of this, and instead add sniffing, chewing, puzzles, slow walking, all of that. So we kind of shift the lifestyle. We wait for the brain to regulate, and often just that stops the biting. In a few rare cases that it doesn't, it's because there's a health issue. So that's the reason why our professional course is a 3-year diploma. One would wonder what is there to learn for 3 years about dogs? It's because of this. My students learn about anatomy and physiology. They should, most health issues, dogs first end up with us. They are not taken to the vet because health issues will present as behavioral issues. Most biting dogs is because they're struggling with something health related, and they will present as behavioral issues before it can, before they're called clinical, right? Before you can actually diagnose it in a clinic, we see behavioral issues. So these are called subclinical health issues, and they come to us. And so a big part of it would be diagnosing, trying to say, okay, I think there's a health issue. I think this is what it is. We need to start getting, start doing diagnostics with a vet, and it can take 6 to 8 months to get to the bottom of health issues. So those where there's an underlying health issue or where there's a deep history of past trauma, those can take 9 months for a big change. We start seeing change within 2 weeks. Okay, the basic changes start within 2 weeks, and then for the brain to actually rewire after we start the therapy, which is kind of slowing the dog down, that can take up to 9 months. And some cases it will drag on because we are not able to identify solution for the health issue. So that can tend to drag on, and we're kind of constantly struggling. But otherwise, I'd say within a year, you are going to be seeing a very, very different dog.
Sorry, Kishore is asking, how to deal with an anxious dog. My dog gets too excited for walks and very anxious when in the car backseat.
Yeah. So again, it really depends on what is causing the anxiety. It's not easy for me to say without looking at it. And that's where you would do the analysis to see what is causing anxiety. You would reduce the amount that the dog is, anything. If it's the car, if it's the walk, you would just reduce it as much as possible till you're able to build the dog's confidence up, and the dog is able to say, okay, I think I can deal with this. So a great example of that would be, so I had a tragedy in my life. I lost my husband last year, and as you can imagine, my emotions up there, clearly my dog's emotions up there. And I could not drive. I was having my anxiety triggers all over the place, and she could not walk. So we were on a parallel journey, and it was interesting for me to watch. And what was required, I would step out of the house with her on the leash. You would never imagine, right, that this is the connection. Who would have thought, right? What is the connection between loss of a partner and your dog not walking? Why is this? This is where, kind of the whole thing ties together. So my emotion is the kind of the link there. And so we would step out. She would step out, stand there, look around, sniff, 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 come back in. And I said, look, I don't want anybody to push me. I'm not going to push you. And I had to do calming activities, a lot of calming activities where she could use her brain to regulate and realize, okay, There is no danger there. I'll take 2 more steps. I'll take 3 more steps. One day she takes 10 steps. Next day she might take 2 steps again. Patience, 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 allowing them to deal with this on their own while at home, reducing adrenalizing activities, increasing calming activities. That is the only support that we can actually do, and give them space to navigate their anxiety. Protect them, make them feel safe. Whenever we feel anxious, it's coming from within here for me. And when I'm saying this, when I feel anxious, you can't do anything other than reassure me that you're there for me. That's what family does. That's what we do for our dog. Don't push them. Don't be on your agenda. Don't be on your clock. Don't move it too fast. Let them do it on your own pace. Reduce adrenalizing activities, increase calming activities, and reassure them. I'm simplifying this a lot. Okay. If you come to my class, you will see it's a 20-hour class. Our foundation class is a 20-hour class, and we speak a lot about anxiety and reassurance, because it's a very key part of dealing with dogs.
Shilps has 2 questions. How do I stop my 11-year-old cat from peeing on the bed? She has started doing it very often. And second question is, I've got my second retriever. She's 3 months old. Looks like she has car sickness. How do I help her come out of it? We travel with our dogs often.
Okay. I know very little about cats, so I'm going to assume that I'm answering this about 11-year-old dog and answer it, but it can't be that different, I'm guessing. So if you're talking to me about an 11-year-old animal, then I'm thinking it's definitely there's an age component to it. As animals age, their bladder starts losing ability to hold for long, and they're looking for places that are more close by. Second thing is they also start getting disoriented if they're losing vision, losing hearing, and things like that. So they tend to pee in places that are more comfortable. 3 is their patience also starts wearing thin. They're becoming old and crotchety. So they're getting adrenalized faster, sooner. More things stress them out. More things make them annoyed and irritated. So I don't know how to stop it, but these are the things that lead to it. And if you can identify if any of these are happening with your animal and you start reducing those, automatically the peeing should come down. So what I'm trying to say repeatedly here is, don't look at the behavior and say, how do I stop the behavior? Instead, ask what's causing it. And that, if you change, the behavior will change on its own. So go back. And if you're not able to do that on your own, that's where you kind of read up more or attend classes or get a professional to help you go back and identify the behavior. Roughly, I've given you the skeleton. This is what you need to do. And car sickness often happens because, again, this is 3-month-old. Again, this is a bit of an age-related problem. Puppies are not very good at balance. Their vestibular development is not that good. So that car sickness has to do with ears. I hope you're aware of that. It has to do with ears. It has to do with vestibular input and that balance, lack of balance. I have car sickness too, so that's why I know that. So for puppies, what I would do is, like with human beings, for those of us who have car sickness, you know the answer. Most of us want to sit on the front seat. And the reason is we need to see where the car is going. That's when we're able to predict a little bit more and create more balance. So they may want to sit on your lap in the front seat until they're able to deal with it. Again, small rides to start with. They're not ready yet for long rides. Don't feed them before you get on a car ride for at least 2 hours, and make them really short drives, not for too long. Because another thing that happens when they get car sick is they start having this association in their brain. Car is yucky. So next time you put them in a car, automatically adrenalized. When they're adrenalized, automatically they're likely to throw up more also. If I'm anxious, I'm going to get even more car sick. So you don't want that association to happen. You have to break that association if it happens, which is painful. So at 3 months, it's probably not happened yet. Don't let it happen. And with any of this slow thing that I'm talking about, there's a term my husband used to say that he used to use in poker: quit while you're ahead. Do just a little bit. And while it is working, stop. Don't get over ambitious. Don't say, oh, yesterday 2-minute car ride worked. Today, let's try an hour. No. If 2-minute worked, stick with 2 minutes for another 2 days and then go up to 3 and stop. Go slow. My teacher had a really lovely way of saying it. If you think you're going slow, go slower. Go slow with them. It's worth it, because the slower you go in the beginning, the faster you'll be able to go once you hit that critical number. So if your dog can handle 10 minutes, then easily the dog will go up to an hour, right? But those 10 minutes, don't go fast. Go very, very, very slow, building 1 minute at a time, 1 minute at a time. Some dogs that have severe car anxiety, I have even had to slow down to the point where get inside the car, sit for a few minutes, get out, or even stand around the car with the doors open. Right? That slow at the beginning, and then we build up.
Yeah, I mean, we see this. So we have 3 of them, right? So one of them is very happy. You put her in the back seat, she'll stay there. The other 2 are more anxious, right? So they come to the front seat. Like, you cannot stop them. They will somehow come to the front seat. So they kind of know it automatically, just like humans would want to sit in the front seat.
So
right?
that's another interesting one. Okay. Social learning. Dogs learn from each other. Dogs learn emotions and habits from each other. So if you have one dog that is calm, or if your dog is anxious, if that is what is causing the car sickness could be vestibular, it could be anxiety, most likely combo. Having the dog do a car ride with the calm dog that he trusts. So my older dog, for instance, Nishi, was very, very calm. And this girl was terrified of the car. Every time we got in the car, we will know that we'll get a bowl of vomit at the end, right? So, having Chiru in the car with Nishi and her observing Nishi, she learned a lot, to the point where today the car is like a second home for her. It's our safe space. Anywhere we go, I have a ramp. I put the ramp on the car and I let Chiru deal with the world. Anytime it gets a little overwhelming, she just goes into the car, and I know that, thank you that you didn't choose to get into this fight and instead chose to go sit in the car. This is a very useful thing. So that kind of a safe space, cars can be very, very useful. It's worth investing. Don't rush. The last line there is, we travel often with our dogs. Don't make that your goal. Don't make that your goal. You'll push yourself and your dog, and you'll frustrate everybody. Don't do that. Instead, it's okay that you want to travel. Keep that on the back burner for some time. Right now, your goal has to be, I want the dog to find this to be a good space. And that doesn't mean exciting space. So don't get in and throw a party, right? Calm. Get in, sit, relax, learn to be just okay with it. If your dog can handle, just start the car, reverse, put it back in and walk out. If your dog can handle just that much, do just that much and build.
Okay, we'll just take, I think we're absolutely out of time. So we'll just take one last question. Okay. And why does my dog jump on strangers when they greet her? How do I stop this, as many people find this aggressive?
Yeah. How you stop it is a long story. I can tell you why. Because again, meeting people, excitement, adrenalization. And like I mentioned, one of the ways some dogs express adrenalization is jumping. And what often happens is, when they come as puppies and they jump on us, we love it. We encourage it. We make them do it repeatedly, and we reward them for it. Suddenly, one fine day, we decide in our brains, oh, you have grown. I don't like this behavior anymore. Suddenly, in our minds, I don't want this anymore. And we expect a memo to go to the dog. And a lot of the way we try to deal with it is by saying, hey, stop it. But that doesn't work. Where is the adrenalization coming from? What are the emotional needs that drove this behavior? Need for connection. That is why they come and connect with us. And this is how they have learned to connect with us. So we have to meet that need for connection, meet the need that the dog needs for tactile touch and connection and things like that. While we let the dog know, you don't need to jump. Without jumping itself, I can give you affection. How you do that? That is a 20-hour class. That takes time. But I can understand. Actually, that was one of the biggest problems I had with Nishi as well. My social circle shrunk because she was a boxer and a huge 40 kg boxer jumping on people means that I lost friends very quickly. And I tried all kinds of things, punishing, rewarding, treating, stay, giving a command, this, that, everything. Finally, because it didn't work, that's when, this whole journey of mine started, and I discovered this new way of doing things. Generally, if you get your dog to calm down, they won't express it in such hyper ways. They will find calmer ways, but they cannot find calmer ways if you insist on keeping them at that height. You have to bring them down. If there's one thing that you will do after this talk, it has to be, how do I reduce adrenalization and increase calming activities and increase sleep? I'm willing to bet that at least 50 to 60% of your dogs are sleeping less than what they need to be.
Wow. That's very interesting. I mean, very counterintuitive, because most of us think that, oh, we live in apartments and, our dogs are probably sleeping a lot more than what they should be. That's the usual thought that we have in our heads, right?
Yeah.
They're not getting enough exercise. They're
Yeah.
sleeping too much.
Don't forget 16 to 18 hours. And this is also very, I start sounding very bizarre when I start saying this, but it's a cultural thing, right? We are wired to be taught that sitting, relaxing, resting, these are all laziness. We use the word laziness.
Right.
And therefore, we have taught ourselves to be wired up all the time. We appreciate this. And then we have to go seek some guru in the Himalayas to figure out how to meditate, because we can't calm down enough. It is something that we have taught ourselves not to do. And there's such a high degree of discomfort. And yet, look at the street dogs. Just next time you walk, right, start keeping a count of what the street dogs are doing. You'll see the number of street dogs that are just chilling, lazing. Dogs are lazy animals, not lazy, but they're relaxed, chilled out animals, as are most predators.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Awesome. Thank you. This was very enlightening. I used to be one of those guys, right, who would be like, oh, I have had dogs since I was a kid, so I know all about them. But there were so many myths you busted today. And you also gave us a framework to think about things, right? As to observe the behavior, see what is the root cause behind that, and then try to reduce the adrenalization. That's the chemical things that's happening in your dogs, and that probably explains a lot of the stuff, a lot of the behaviors that we see. Right? So I think great takeaways. Thank you so much. And so I will circulate the information that you have provided, and your book as well. So I'm going to get that book for sure.
I do highly recommend. The book is a nice complement to this talk that we did, because you'll see so many of these ideas repeated there, but with more details, right, on what to do. So when it comes to sniffing and chewing, why do it, what kind of ways to do it, what are the different ways, and the details of why over exercising is causing such a big problem, and adrenalization, why this is a problem in the long run, and the anatomy angle that I didn't touch upon at all today. I mean, I just briefly mentioned. That's there in much more detail in the book as well, but it's not, don't worry, it's not very geeky. There are stories too. So I think you will enjoy it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sindhu. This was really, really great. And we'll be in touch. Thank you.
My pleasure.